Hey, it's Alan, and I just wanted to let you know that you can now listen to the ongoing history of new music early and ad-free on Amazon Music, included with Prime. Hi, I'm Alan Cross, and for the next few weeks of the podcast, we're going to dive deep into the ongoing history archives. There are more than 1,000 shows in there, and many of these programs have not been heard for years. So, welcome to an ongoing history of new music archives podcast with a series called The Top 100 Moments in New Rock. Now, bear in mind that these shows originally aired in the spring of 2004, but we thought it might be fun to hear where we've been, how things used to be, and how much everything has changed since. We hope you enjoy this look back in time.
This is the sound of history.
The councils, they ban my concerts and they take my money.
I can't help but have a soft spot for Ziggy Stardust. Not that I'd ever want to portray him again, but it certainly was sort of fun at the time.
Well, apparently we've been told that we've got to stop now and we have to go because there's some trouble outside.
And I looked hidden through the glass door, and there's this guy laying there with a shotgun laying on his chest and blood running out of his ear.
This is another special project of the ongoing history of new music, the 100 greatest new rock moments ever, Part 1.
This is the ongoing history of new music podcast with Alan Cross.
Hello again, I'm Alan Cross. When a lot of people look at history, they look at only the big stuff. You know, the wars, the plagues, the disasters, the assassinations, the earthquakes. You know what I mean. All those things are important, but they don't even begin to tell half the story, because to understand history, any kind of history, is to also look at the little moments. And you know what I'm talking about, tiny, boring events and decisions that seem completely innocuous and unimportant, or even meaningless at the time they happen, but eventually the consequences prove to be unbelievably huge. For example, one of the great turning points in history was the Battle of Waterloo on June 18, 1815. Had Napoleon's French army defeated Britain's Duke of Wellington that afternoon, Europe might look very, very different today, and you and I might not even be here. But back on that day, June 18, 1815, a series of little moments conspired to change history. And one of them was a bad case of hemorrhoids. Yeah, hemorrhoids. You heard me right. This is one way of interpreting the Battle of Waterloo. You see, Napoleon had such a bad bout of piles and diarrhea that he couldn't ride a horse that day. As a result, he had to spend much of his time in his battle tent and ended up delegating too much of his authority. The chain of command became fractured, communication lines broke down, and Napoleon ended up losing. So just think how different the world might be had Preparation H been invented in 1815. And that's what this 10-part series will be like. But we're going to be looking at the 100 most significant events in new rock history. Some are obvious, the big stuff that made the news. You can't ignore those. But we're also going to look at the small things that are at the root of some of the big things. It's a really fascinating way to look at history and society and art. So let's begin at the beginning. Moment number 100 became apparent on October 31st, 1967. James Jewel Osterberg was a drummer from Detroit who had spent much of the middle 60s backing up Motown groups like the Shangri-Las and the Temptations whenever they played around Michigan. His other big gig was playing in a local band called the Iguanas. After dodging the Vietnam draft by convincing the draft board that he was gay, James tried his hand at being a blues musician in Chicago before moving back to Detroit. By this time, James was going by the name Iggy Pop. Iggy from his time in the Iguanas, and Pop after a local junkie. One night, over a bag of dope and a Three Stooges movie marathon on television, he and a bunch of local degenerates decided to form a band that they call the Stooges. Okay, but that's not the moment. The day before their first show, this is Monday, October 30th, 1967, guitarist Ron Ashton got a little excited. He painted Iggy's Hawaiian guitar. He painted it, including the pickups. Not good. So when the Stooges hit the stage, Iggy's guitar was completely useless because of the paint. And not knowing what else to do, Iggy took it on stage with him anyway, and eventually he just abandoned the thing completely and started dancing around like a nut. That's when his pants started falling down. And when Iggy realized that the audience thought this pants falling down thing was part of the show, he went extra crazy and started doing all these really weird things, and the crowd loved it. And it was this event that set Iggy on the road to becoming the godfather of punk. And it's all because Ron Asheton accidentally painted Iggy's guitar. It's moment number 100.
Now I wanna be your dog. And now I wanna be your dog. And now I wanna be your dog.
New rock moment number 100. Ron Asheton's screw up with Iggy Pop's guitar. Moment number 99 is the result of some bad weather. Two things got underway on Friday, August 12, 1994. The first was the Major League Baseball strike that wiped out the rest of the season. And the second was a festival in Saugerties, New York, commemorating the 25th anniversary of the original Woodstock. Shortly after the 350,000 people arrived, it began to rain. And then it rained, and rained again, and rained some more. But we'll get back to that. About 6 weeks earlier, June 29th, 1994, Trent Reznor and Nine Inch Nails released that long-awaited second album, The Downward Spiral. The pent-up demand was huge, and the album entered the charts at number 2, and it's not a stretch to say that a good number of the people at Woodstock were there to see Trent. Nine Inch Nails set was on Saturday night. Earlier in the day, things got real weird when a high-voltage power line went down and landed on their bus, and only the rubber wheels of the bus kept the band from being fried. They had to wait inside until somebody came and shut off the power. By the time Trent and company took the stage that night, the crowd was tired and dirty and wet, but they were stoked. In a show of solidarity, Trent and the whole band rolled around in the mud and got absolutely filthy. The performance that night solidified Trent's position as one of the most important new rock artists of the 1990s. Moment number 99, Nine Inch Nails, live at Woodstock. Moment number 99, Nine Inch Nails' amazing performance at Woodstock 94. New rock moment number 98 involves the opening of a nightclub. In the early 80s, the city of Manchester was undergoing some kind of cultural transformation. It was moving from this drab Victorian industrial city to something much more vibrant. The Manchester music scene had much to do with this. Groups like the Buzzcocks and the Fall and Joy Division had begun to shake things up during their original punk era. And as the 80s dawned, we were starting to hear about the Smiths and New Order. On June 26, 1982, this cultural revolution got its headquarters, the Hacienda nightclub on Whitworth Street. The club was the idea of Tony Wilson, the head of Factory Records, which was New Order's label. And the name comes from a very obscure reference in a left-wing book that was very popular amongst 60s-style revolutionaries. The line is, "The Hacienda must be built." In other words, the name had nothing to do with any Spanish-style dwellings. Anyway, like all factory projects and record releases, it had a serial number. FAC 51, F-A-C 51. It was designed as a place to showcase and celebrate Manchester's music. The fact that it was a money pit was, kind of besides the point. Between 1982 and 1997, the place was kept afloat by New Order's record sales. But as a place to hang out, it was great. If you've ever seen the excellent movie 24-Hour Party People, you'll have an idea of what it's like.
FAC 51, a.k.a. The Hacienda. Buildings create synergy. They're a focus for creativity. When the Victorians built the railways, they didn't just put up porter cabins. Jesus. They went to town. Just listen to the reverberations. It's lovely, isn't it? The sound of my voice. Buildings change the way people think. That's how it happened in Renaissance Florence.
Yeah, but this isn't Renaissance Florence. This is Dark Ages Manchester.
The balconies and stairwells were ringside seats to the explosion in rave music in Manchester and the rise of the DJ as star. It was also ground zero for the introduction of ecstasy into British club culture. The Hacienda finally bit the dust in 1997 after a series of financial crises and persistent drug crime problems. The club was sold off piece by piece, including the dance floor, tile by tile, and the property was turned into a block of luxury apartments. But while it lasted, it was sure wild. New rock moment number 98, the opening of the Hacienda in Manchester, June 26th, 1982. the flavor of New Rock Moment number 98. The Happy Mondays, celebrating the opening of the Hacienda nightclub in Manchester. Today's battles against downloading are really nothing new. The last time the record industry found themselves facing a major sales crisis was in the late 1970s and the early 1980s. Of course, we didn't have computers or the internet back then. The problem was actually very analog. At the dawn of the 80s, the disco bubble had burst, and record sales were suddenly in free fall for the first time. And according to the industry back then, the major problem was home taping. People were buying albums and then running off cassette copies for their friends. Public education campaigns were launched with slogans like, "Home taping is killing music, and it's illegal." Artists like Elvis Costello signed anti-home taping petitions. Now, it sounds pretty strange today, but the industry's position was that if you wanted to listen to your favorite album in the car, you shouldn't tape it. You should go out and buy another copy on cassette and listen to that. And plenty of performers agreed. It was a huge, huge issue back then. But not everybody bought into this. For example, Bow Wow Wow, British group, released a single encouraging home taping called C30, C60, C90, Go. Those are all lengths of blank cassettes. And one version of this song came on cassette with the song on side 1. Side 2 was left blank, so you could, tape something. New Rock Moment number 97, the great home taping crisis of the early 1980s.
Now I got a new way to move it, shiny and black and don't in the groove. Well, I don't need no album rack, I carry my collection over my back. C30, C60, C90, go off the radio, I get a constant flow. Hit it, pause it, record and play. Turn it, rewind, rub it away.
New Rock Moment number 97, the home taping crisis of the early 1980s. When we return, New Rock Moment number 96, and here's the date, July 13th, 1985. Now, there were a lot of big moments that day, but we're going to focus on just one, an event that almost destroyed one of the biggest bands in the world. At 12:01 p.m., Greenwich Mean Time, July 13th, 1985, the first band played the first note on stage at Wembley Stadium in London. It was the start of Live Aid, one of the most spectacular charity events ever conceived. And by the time things wrapped up in Philadelphia 16 hours later, more than 2 billion people had helped raise $70 million for famine relief in Ethiopia. U2 was part of the lineup that day, and they were introduced by Jack Nicholson at 5:20 p.m., and what followed is New Rock Moment number 96. The band, like everybody else, had only enough time to play 3 songs, and things started well enough with a version of Sunday Bloody Sunday. But then things started to go all pear-shaped when they launched into Bad from the Unforgettable Fire. Bono decided he needed a dance partner and spent many long minutes trying to pull somebody out of the audience. By the time he was finished, U2's time was up, and they never got to play their third song, which would have been Pride in the Name of Love, their biggest hit to that point. Backstage, huge fight. The Edge, Larry, and Adam were furious with Bono's grandstanding and his inability to stick with the plan. Emotions got out of control, and Bono allegedly said, "Fine, I quit." In other words, as rock and roll was bringing the whole world together, U2 was flying apart. Bono apparently flew back to Dublin alone and eventually went for a long drive in the countryside just to, kind of calm down. Legend has it that he picked up a female hitchhiker who recognized Bono right away. She went on and on about how moved she was by U2's Live Aid performance. This conversation made Bono think that maybe he had been a little hasty in quitting. When he got back to Dublin, he found the other 3 members of the group, apologized, and asked to be allowed back into the band. Who knows what might have happened if Bono had driven past that woman on the side of that Irish country road. New Rock Moment number 96, the fallout from U2's 1985 performance at Live Aid. Here's a portion of their set that day, July 13th, 1985. New Rock Moment number 96, U2 at Live Aid, and all the things that happened within the band after Bono's onstage screw-up. Our 95th moment is our first death, and the date was April 19th, 2002. Alice in Chains had been one of the first and one of the biggest bands to come out of Seattle during the grunge explosion in the early 1990s, but they were also one of the darkest. Drugs, especially heroin, played a huge part in not only the band's music, but in the day-to-day lives of the guys in the group. Singer Lane Staley was the heaviest user. As Alice in Chains became more successful, Lane's drug use increased, and by the mid-1990s, he had gone through countless attempts to clean up. Lane isolated himself more and more, especially after his longtime girlfriend, Demree, died of complications related to injecting drugs. By the late 90s, Lane was in such rough shape that he couldn't tour. He had become a hardcore hermit junkie, mixing smack and cocaine and crack that was delivered right to his condo by a network of dealers. His health deteriorated, but he didn't seem to care. In April 2002, Lane's accountants, the people paid to look after his bank accounts, noticed that there had been no withdrawals for a couple of weeks. The accountants called Lane's mom and stepfather. They called the cops. And just after 5:30 in the afternoon of April 19, 2002, Seattle police kicked in the deadbolted door of Lane's condo. They found him on the couch with a heroin cooker and a syringe nearby. And the best guess the coroner could come up with is that Lane died on or about April 5th, the same day on which Kurt Cobain had died 8 years earlier. New rock moment number 95, the long, slow death of Alice in Chains singer Lane Staley. The long suicide of Alice in Chains singer Lane Staley, number 95 on our list of the top 100 moments in new rock. Moment number 94 occurred on July 8, 1972. That night, David Bowie stepped on stage at the Royal Festival Hall in London and introduced himself by saying, "Hi, I'm Ziggy." That was the beginning of the 360-day lifespan of Ziggy Stardust, the world's first synthetic, prepackaged, ultra-theatrical rock star, and one of the most influential bits of marketing and PR the world of rock and roll has ever seen. Bowie's character changed so much in terms of rock music. The theater, the clothes, the makeup, the presentation. It was equal parts hard rock and vaudeville, disposable pop mixed with serious theater. It was fashion mixed with technology. And it was all very sexy and very sexual. These days, it's really hard to remember the impact that Ziggy had. But back in the 70s, this is 1972, he made cross-dressing fashionable. He made guys wearing makeup fashionable. His haircut was copied by millions. And then there's the music. If you add everything up, just to the end of 1973, all the albums and singles, Bowie Records spent 182 weeks on the album charts. Whole books have been written about the Ziggy phenomenon. PhD theses have been written about him. A hotel in Thailand was named after him. A village in Cyprus carries his name. Punks and goths and industrial stars of the future all took cues from him. Ziggy Stardust was quite simply the most famous and influential fictional rock star ever conceived. New rock moment number 98, the night David Bowie introduced the world to his new character, Ziggy Stardust. Moment number 93 also has to do with Bowie. In the late 1970s, he acquired a new manager, a character by the name of Tony DeFries, and he was only too happy to help Bowie search for a new approach to rock music. And when Bowie decided that it might be fun to wear a dress in public, Tony DeFries was only too happy to oblige. When Bowie released the album The Man Who Sold the World, the original cover featured him reclining wearing this full-length blue dress, a man's dress, according to Bowie, that he purchased at a boutique called Mr. Fish. A promotional tour of America followed. You got to remember that Bowie was only big-ish in Britain and had absolutely no reputation whatsoever in the United States. But because of immigration and work permit problems, Bowie couldn't tour, but he did give journalists private concerts while sitting cross-legged on his hotel room bed. But again, this is 1971. America not ready for a guy wearing a dress. The country was just not ready for a feminized rocker. A gun was pulled on Bowie in Texas, and many record stores refused to stock the album until RCA Records supplied them with a different cover. And as a result, The Man Who Sold the World sold exactly 1,395 copies in all of America between November 1970 and the end of June 1971. Less than 1,400 copies because of the dress thing. Bowie's gamble to wear a dress in public was such a failure that he immediately started thinking about how he could morph into something a little bit more palatable for American taste. And the next character was Ziggy Stardust. Bowie in a dress on the cover of The Man Who Sold the World. New Rock Moment number 93. Bowie in the blue dress on the cover of The Man Who Sold the World, November 1970, New Rock Moment number 93. We have two more moments for part one of this series. Number 92 is an object lesson in how not to behave while traveling first class. Back in a moment. Welcome back to part one of our look at the top 100 moments in New Rock history. I'm Alan Cross. Moment number 92 began on April 21st, 2001, when REM guitarist Peter Buck boarded British Airways flight number 48 for a 10-hour flight to London. Settling into his seat, Peter pulled out a sleeping pill called Ambien and proceeded to wash it down with up to 15 glasses of red wine. That's when things got weird. Instead of falling asleep and dreaming the flight away, he ended up with what doctors call a case of non-insane automatism. He basically went nuts in the first-class cabin, ransacking the place, flinging yogurt all over the place, and attacking various members of the crew. Peter acted out some latent aggression instead of falling into dream sleep. So that's right, he went crazy instead of going into REM sleep. REM, rapid eye movement. Anyway. When the plane landed at Heathrow, Peter was arrested and charged. His first trial collapsed under strange circumstances, but at the second trial, which lasted 3 weeks and featured people like Bono of U2 testifying as a character witness, Peter was acquitted, mainly because the jury bought the doctor's testimony of non-insane automatism. The date, April 5th, 2002. Peter Buck's air rage moment. British Airways Flight 48, April 21st, 2001. New Rock Moment number 92.
It's the end of the world as we know it. It's the end of the world as we know it. It's the end of the world as we know it. And I feel fine.
New Rock Moment number 92. REM's Peter Buck goes insane on an airplane. We have time for one more on this show, and it has to do with the time ska made the earth move. And I mean literally made the earth move. August 18th, 1992, Madness, one of the great British ska bands of all time, played an event in Finsbury Park in London called Madstock. It was the first appearance by the band in 8 years. Attendance exactly 36,007 people. As Madness's set reached a climax, people who lived in a nearby apartment block swore they felt an earthquake. I mean, the building shook and the windows rattled and the floor rumbled. An earthquake in central London? Scientists didn't know, but they wanted to check it out. So after careful investigation, geologists determined that, well, down the street, Madness was playing their set. And so many people were dancing and skanking during the song One Step Beyond that they created vibrations that simulated an earthquake for blocks. Their dancing actually registered on the Richter scale. The Great Madness Earthquake in London, August 18th, 1992. New Rock Moment number 91.
Let's review the first 10 events on our list of the top 100 moments in the history of New Rock. Number 100, Ron Ashton ruins Iggy Pop's guitars. Number 99, 9 Inch Nails at Woodstock in August 1994. Number 98, the opening of the Hacienda Club in Manchester. Number 97, the fight against home taping in the early 1980s. Number 96, U2's performance at Live Aid in 1985. Number 95, the death of Alice in Chains singer Lane Staley. Number 94, the debut of Ziggy Stardust. Number 93, David Bowie's decision to wear a dress. Number 92, Peter Buck's air rage incident. And number 91, the Great Madness earthquake of 1992. On the next show, we'll look at the time Green Day destroyed a record store, an infuriating moment for Michael Jackson, and the time a U2 concert broke out during rush hour, and more. It's all coming on part 2 of the top 100 New Rock moments of all time. If you want more like this, there are hundreds of ongoing history of new music podcasts available for free. All the platforms have them. Make sure you follow and like the feed so you never miss an episode. Plus, if you can rate and review, that would be great. We can all meet up on my social media channels. There's my website, ajournalofmusicalthings.com, which is updated every day. Plus, there's the free newsletter that goes with it. And I have another podcast. It looks at the intersection of music and true crime. Look for Uncharted, Crime and Mayhem in the Music Industry, wherever you get your podcasts. And I welcome any emails. Just drop me a line at alan@alancross.ca. Technical production is by Rob Johnston. We'll talk to you next time. I'm Alan Cross.